Hey everyone, welcome to another installment of Harry Potter Theory. In today's video, we're going to be exploring a little lesson in Harry Potter history and taking a look at the history of the fabled Animagus. More specifically, I'm going to be revealing to you all the first 3 recorded but unregistered Animagi. That is, the first 3 ancient witches and wizards that were able to shapeshift. An Animagus, simply put, is a witch or wizard that is able to transform themselves into an animal and back again. Animagus is a combination of the word animal and the Greek word magus, meaning animal wizard. It is an extremely rare and difficult ability to master, so much so that it requires you to register your knowledge of this ability with the ministry, but that wasn't necessary in a pre-ministry world. An Animagus will typically have an animal form that they transform into that is closely linked to their personality and inner traits. Further to this, the Animagus form of a witch or wizard will almost always resemble their patronus form as well. Throughout the series we're introduced to quite a few Animagi: McGonagall, a cat; Pettigrew, a rat; Sirius Black, a dog; James Potter, a stag; Rita Skeeter, a beetle. And if you're thinking that this list looks short, well, then you'd be right. Becoming an Animagus is no easy feat. In fact, so few people have actually achieved this magical feat that the Ministry of Magic requires all Animagi to register their Animagus status. But the ancient witches and wizards I want to talk about today existed in a pre-ministry era. In fact, some of these witches and wizards were from an entirely different part of the world altogether. I'm going to work backwards, starting with the third known Animagus, and working my way towards the first recorded Animagus to grace the wizarding world. Let's get into it. Morgana le Fay. In case you weren't already aware, the Morgana le Fay from Harry Potter, mentioned on a chocolate frog card in this series, was inspired by a pseudo-historical figure most commonly referred to by some derivation of the same name. Morgan, just Morgana, you name it. Further to this, if we look at her in a pseudo-historical context, we can see where inspiration was drawn for the witch in Harry Potter. Morgana is a tough pseudo-historical figure to summarize because, across many pieces of literature, she has been reintroduced with so many different names, titles, and abilities. Perhaps the most interesting thing about Morgana's character, however, is her moral ambivalence and how it evolved through folklore. Early appearances of Morgan do not elaborate her character beyond her role as a goddess, a fae, a witch, or a sorceress, generally benevolent and related to King Arthur as his magical savior and protector. Her prominence increased over time, as did her moral ambivalence, and in some texts there is an evolutionary transformation of her to an antagonist. The concept of Morgana that we're most familiar with first appears in writer Geoffrey of Monmouth's work entitled Vita Merlini, or The Life of Merlin, which was written in 1150. In this version of Vita Merlini, Morgana is referred to as Morgen, a name which means seaborn. The name survived in Middle Welsh as Morien, and the cognate form in Old Irish is Muegen, the name of a shapeshifting female saint commonly associated with the sea. Hold on, a shapeshifter? This ties in beautifully with Harry Potter. We first hear of Morgana le Fay in the Harry Potter universe when Ron mentions that he has about 6 of her chocolate frog card. I've got Morgana again, and I've got about 6 of her. Chocolate frog cards generally feature iconic witches and wizards of history, so the fact that she made the cut is a testament to her prominence as a historical figure, even in the Harry Potter universe. Her card makes it very clear that she was a very powerful, dark witch, and this directly sums up the version of Morgana that the Harry Potter universe adopted. We got the evil Morgana, not the morally righteous one. Provided that her card describes her as a very powerful witch, I think that it's reasonable to assume that Morgana was extremely versed in the dark arts, possessing knowledge of all of the dark spells that we are accustomed to, and perhaps many more. However, what's interesting about Morgana is that, despite being evil, she possessed immense knowledge of powerful healing abilities. We generally associate healing and the ability to heal with those that are morally good or righteous, but Morgana contradicts this. But what's one of the most interesting aspects about Morgana? Well, she was an Animagus. Not the first Animagus ever to grace the wizarding world, but she was up there. Turns out, Morgana could transform into a bird at will. And can you guess what type of bird? Well, that's unconfirmed, but I've got a theory on this. Because the pseudo-historical figure of Morgana goes by many names, I decided to look at the associations with each, and as it turns out, Morgan means seaborn. What this tells me is that Morgana likely transformed into some kind of seabird. Which seabird in particular is unclear, although I'd venture to say something like a heron. Cliodne. The origins of wizardkind go back many years. In fact, they go so far back that there is a lot that simply isn't known about the history of the wizarding world. However, what we do know is that one of the first known members of wizardkind to exist in Europe was a witch by the name of Cliodne, who presided there sometime in the Middle Ages. Cliodne was a famous Irish druidess, and notably appears on a chocolate frog card in the Harry Potter series. At one point, Harry picks up a chocolate frog card with a picture of her while she was scratching her nose. Cliodne was a powerful druidess, and her abilities were vast, including, of course, the ability to transform. Her main Animagus form was that of a seabird, the same as Morgana, but it has also been expressed that her unparalleled skill in transfiguration even allowed her to turn herself into things like waves. Crazy. Furthermore, always travelling along with Cliodne were 3 magical birds that could cure the sick by singing them to sleep. However, I'll say this, the concept of Cliodne in Harry Potter was of course inspired by the Cliodne of Irish mythology, a goddess of love and beauty who travelled with 3 magical birds that cured the sick. Falco Aesalon. Alright, now you might be thinking, Cliodne and Morgana were both around as far back as the medieval era, so when on earth did Falco Aesalon, the first ever recorded Animagus, exist? Well, as it turns out, Falco Aesalon was a Greek wizard who existed sometime between the years 700 and 480 BC, meaning he was around well before the existence of Cliodne and Morgana. In fact, it turns out that ancient Greece produced a lot of powerful witches and wizards back in the day, as if you'll remember from my Acrisdis video, the man who purportedly created the Dementors was also from ancient Greece. Anyway, not much is actually known about Falco, other than the fact that he was the first ever recorded Animagus. It's unknown if he was the first wizard to discover the process entirely, or if he was just the first one to be recognized in history as being able to transform. His Animagus form is just as his name would suggest, a falcon. Pretty cool if you ask me. Interestingly, Falco is actually the former scientific name of the European Merlin bird. Merlin, in Harry Potter, was the most powerful wizard to have ever lived, so perhaps there was some inspiration drawn for Falco's name there behind the scenes. Like the others on this list, Falco was of course also immortalized on a chocolate frog card for being the first ever Animagus. And that concludes the list for the first 3 recorded Animagi. Closing thoughts of mine? Well, I thought it was interesting that all 3 of them ended up being birds. With the vast possibilities for potential Animagus forms, you'd think there'd be some more variety there. I wonder why. Did you guys know about these 3? Comment down below. Also, if you enjoy the content, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, remember, imperfect understanding is often more dangerous than ignorance.